Okay, so a new study from UKCEH reveals that extreme soil moisture droughts are going to be occurring more frequently into the future, and that's down to climate change. And is that, if you like, a change in the current thinking, or shall we say, a confirmation of it? Just what is the report telling us?
Yeah, so it is a more accurate prediction of the future soil moisture droughts under climate change, and it's thanks to the modeling methodology that we use, the type of data that we incorporate into our methodology. And as you rightly say, we predict in our results increases of this extreme soil moisture droughts into the future.
Okay, and in terms of putting that into perspective, I don't know if I can remember, I suspect you're too young to remember, but back in 1976, there was a very famous drought, and then I think 1995, and then more recently people talk about it. It'd just be good to understand the perspective of sort of the recent history and what's predicted into the future.
Yeah, so in our analysis, we look at 3 time periods. So we look at the past period, which is between 1980 and 2000, and the 2 future periods. So the near future period between 2020 and 2040, and the far future period between 2060 and 2080. And what we find in terms of the droughts is that in the past period, we see that the extreme soil moisture droughts could occur once every 16 years. While in the near future, this frequency will increase to once every 5 or 6 years. And in the far future, we see further increases to once every 3 years. So yeah, so we see these step increases going into the future.
Okay, and alongside the increased frequency of these events, I believe you found as well that the droughts, I mean, traditionally, I guess we think they occur just in the summer months, but they are going to actually last for begin earlier and end later. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so the extreme droughts, they actually associate the ones that we look at, they're associated with durations of 90 days or more. But aside of that, we also look into what happens into individual months, and we look at soil moisture levels in individual months and compare these soil moisture levels in the future with the past. And what we find is that in the near future, months with high risk of soil moisture levels are between June and September. And in the far future, this period stretches to between May and November. So it, as well as the summer months, it includes late spring, but also, the autumn months.
Okay, and for those folks that say, well, paraphrase, we've heard it all before, we're not, unaware of these warnings about how climate change has impacted us and the droughts. It'd be good to understand, as I think you said at the start of the conversation, the accuracy level, if you like. So it'd be good to understand why this study is a little bit different and how it is you've collated the data to give this more accurate view of the future.
Yes, so it is a more accurate prediction. So what we do, we combine high resolution modeling with soil moisture observations for the first time to estimate future soil moisture levels. And to give a bit more details about the data that we use, so we combine 3 elements. So the first elements are the soil moisture observations. So there are field scale soil moisture observations from a UK-wide network called Cosmos UK. The second element is the land surface model that we use, which is capable of modeling soil moisture processes. And it's called the JOULS, which stands for Joint UK Land Environment Simulator. And the third element are the climate model outputs. So there are high resolution data called 2.2 kilometer convection permitting UK climate projections from the Met Office. So we combine these 3 elements, these field scale soil moisture observations from the Cosmos UK network, land surface modeling, so the JOULS model, and high resolutions UK climate projections. and with that we obtain these future estimates of soil moisture levels, which we analyze in the context of droughts.
Okay, and alongside that analysis work, you've also, I think, looked at the impact of this future you've outlined in terms of the likely impact on farming, food security, and water availability. So it'd just be good to understand a little bit about each of those. So perhaps if we can share I mean, I joke with my friends here, farming friends, that actually in the winter they should be growing rice because there's so much water in the winter. But what's the reality in terms of the drought impact for the farming sector?
Yeah, so we discussed briefly these impacts in our study, and for farming, so obviously the soil water levels will be lower, so that will directly impact the crop yields. Also, the land grazing, the land used for grazing may become less productive. So that means that that dairy and meat products may become more expensive. But also using the finding about the individual months where months later in the autumn may become affected by drier soils. So that means that crops grown in autumn may also get impacted by these dry soils, especially being in their foundation stages, where it is important to keep them wet. So for farming, it's reduce crop yields really, and the land for grazing, and there may need to be adaptations to these events in order to make sure that to ensure food security essentially. So that brings it to the second aspect, because food security is directly related really to the farming impact. So with reduced crop yields and reduced productivity of grazing lands, we may expect food shortages and increases in prices. In terms of water availability, so our study focuses on the soil water available for plants. So of course there will be less water available in soils, so there will be more demand for water for the agricultural purposes. Nevertheless, so these very hot periods, these periods of droughts will also be associated with hot weather. So people will need water to cool, to water their gardens. In this hot weather, it's not only soil water that it's not only soil water levels that will be reduced, but also quite likely lakes, reservoirs, rivers, water levels there may be reduced too. So there may be in general water shortages. So these soil moisture droughts may be just part of a bigger problem really, which needs to be considered.
Yeah, and in terms of that, the likely impact, I mean, whether the report covers it or just perhaps your own thoughts in terms of the likely impact of these soil moisture droughts, is it going to be a sort of, shall we say, a slight change to some of the things you've talked about? So farmers might look at growing slightly different crops, for example, or is it going to be a whole? I know, again, way back when, I think it was after the 95 drought, there were reports suggesting that, we're going to have vineyards in the country in 50 years time, whatever it was. I mean, are we talking an extreme change potentially, or a more subtle change into the future?
So it's hard to say. So we are talking about this extreme drought. So these are there will be the periods where there will be really little water in the soils for plants to uptake. So as you were saying, likely changes to the plants that we grow. So we may want to invest in plants that are more drought resistant, plants with longer roots, so that they can uptake water from the deeper water reserves, which dry out much more slowly. We may want to invest in extra water storages to make sure that in these difficult periods there is extra water available, for instance, for agricultural means. More efficient water usage in general. So yeah, thinking about those things.
And I think I read this morning, I think the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, which is a grand sounding body, but they produced a report, I think that's more global, suggesting, similar to yourselves, this substantial potential shortfall in water. I mean, again, your thoughts maybe, do you think that the various stakeholders are taking this as seriously as they should? Or do you worry there's even, I suggest, a bit of a backlash at the moment? The oil and gas industries are slightly backsliding on, commitments. Is sustainability, if not gone out of fashion, perhaps been sort of pigeonholed for another day? Just your thoughts, I suppose.
Yeah, so I am a little bit worried that although there is this evidence of warming climate and the potential impacts, I am a little bit worried that maybe it's not as high priority as it really should be. And yeah, perhaps adaptation is an important aspect of all of this, to make sure that we have this extra water, that we grow the right kind of plants that can resist towards these impacts, these negative impacts. But also, we could also try to avoid the scale of these events by reducing greenhouse gas emissions into the future, now, so that the future looks like different.
And any thoughts as to what it takes? Again, I'm chatting to someone, they were suggesting that I think it was the East Anglia region, which is notoriously sort of short of water even at the moment, that's some house building projects were not going ahead because the various water companies didn't have enough water to supply. I've no idea if that's true or not, but is it, what do you think it'll take for people to understand just how much, whether it's house building, the fact that when we turn the taps on, suddenly there isn't any. I mean, what level of shock do you think people need to get to grips, or to understand that lifestyles need to change? We can't just carry on as we are.
Yeah, I mean, and as you say, like even in 2022, there was this big drought experience in the UK, and there were exactly these kind of consequences. Water shortages impact on the transport infrastructure, crop yields. So we already see these things happening, and they will just intensify in the future. So I guess the more evidence we can gather, hopefully, the more we can convince people that of the impact of climate change. But also, we already see, quite severe events happening in recent years, really.
Okay, it's been lovely to chat to you, Magdalena, and thank you for explaining the report's findings and also for sharing your thoughts on some of the topics raised. But really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.